Welcome to Vertical Pursuit. This is a podcast that is mostly designed to grab guys, but also, we know, by grabbing a lot of men and hopefully giving them some good practical advice, and I don't want to say, again, intervention so much, but it tends to make their wives or girlfriends or friends around them happy as well. And I was talking with, by the way, thanks David Ward, who's here on production, Nick Livingston, Colton Myers. Thanks guys always for your help. David and I were talking before the podcast today just about the value of it. And we're talking about, we've talked in recent episodes about men in isolation and men under attack and kind of the discomfort some guys have with reaching out to other guys and asking difficult questions.
Yeah.
In a way to try to bring them into community, because we've talked so much about the reason that we've done this podcast and are doing this podcast is to get guys into community, to get them in a band of brothers into cohorts. Well, let Vertical Pursuit be that. So if you're, as we've said before, you can download the Vertical Pursuit app and then send that app. You can text it to somebody, and that's where you can find the podcast, which, by the way, is also a video podcast. Let that be kind of your entry point. And if they don't write anything back, then ask them about it later. But sometimes if it's difficult, that idea of, hey, I know we're hanging out at the bar and we're chasing babes, but I want to ask you some serious, tough questions. I know that's tough. And I know for a lot of guys that's hard. And you're worried about how it'll be received.
Yep.
And you're worried about how they'll judge you for that. So hopefully tools like this, even this podcast, can be an entry point for maybe a deeper discussion. Mike Barrett, Mike Tatlock. Mike is a pastor and an NBA team chaplain. If you haven't been with us before, and we've been friends a long time and started this after we used to sit out over a fire, and whether it be on a hunting trip or a fishing trip or whatever, and talk about some things. And we had another friend of ours say, gosh, man, guys need to be in these discussions. They need to have these fireside chats. And so we decided to do this. And hopefully the gift of communication is something that comes pretty easily to both of us. And segueing to today's topic, and that is about spiritual gifts. And I hate that term. I know it's a generic term. But what I'm talking about is a term or a phrase that we hear used sometimes in order to inspire men is how you leverage what you have. And leveraging your gifts, we always hear, hey, share your gift. Leveraging your spiritual gift is the way I'd like to put it, because we're all gifted in something, not always the same thing, clearly. But how do we truly leverage? And everybody knows in business how you leverage a relationship, how you leverage an experience, how you leverage a situation that will benefit you, maybe financially, and that's business. But let's go deeper than that.
Yeah.
And how we perhaps leverage all we have for others, or for, as we would say in a Christian world, how would you do that for the kingdom?
Yeah.
Leveraging all that you are. What's the rest of that phrase? You have that on something.
I do.
Leverage all you have.
Right.
Risk all to be all, maybe is what I've seen before. And I think that's kind of where we're at. But when it comes down to leveraging, and I know you've done a recent series on how we leverage our gifts, how we leverage everything.
Yeah.
It's such an important topic today.
It is.
It's for everybody, but for our audience, hopefully, the men who do tune in and listen.
Yeah.
I want them to understand, and maybe we can give them some practical ways on how they leverage their all.
Yeah. Well, I think whenever we talk about leveraging, like you said so well, we all know what leveraging is. We use it in the terms of business, and we use it in the terms of relationships. I like to start the conversation leveraging with regrets. Every guy that's listening right now, depending on your age, even if you're 18, 19, 20, you can look back and go, man, why did I do that? And what was that about? I wish I could go back and change that. But I'll tell you what, you get into your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, that's only going to increase more and more. Looking back over your life going, did I make the most of my life? Did I chase after the things of the world? Did I chase the ladder, executive ladder? Did I chase, the wealth ladder? Did I go out there and I accumulated? I got the 401s and I got all the other retirements. I got all the securities. I got the investments, the house. I got all the toys. And I still wake up going, man, am I really living my life for what matters? And I'll tell you what's taking a lot of guys out right now is a harsh reality. They're waking up going, what is my life for? Mm-hmm. Does it matter for anything? Am I making a difference? And at some point, you're going to ask the question, do I have any legacy? Am I going to be able to look past my own life and go, did my life even contribute to something? That's the context of leveraging is, am I making every ounce of my life matter?
Why do you think that is right now such an issue that has taken guys out? Why today? Why now? I mean,
Yeah.
And I've heard and I keep trying to grab cliches and I'm missing on them, but what is it? Hard times create tough, or, man. I guess my whole point is, and some people have talked about, are we coming through a really easy time where all of a sudden everybody's soft?
Yeah.
And then you're having to discover, what have I truly done and what have I truly left, as you talked about legacy. But I am curious, what do you think the issue is right now? Because we know the guys, and we've talked a couple episodes about the suicide rate among men.
Well,
40 to 60 is brutal. So
It is.
what is causing this?
Take that one. We'll take a few of those, break these down. So the first one you talk about is, guys that are, they're, looking at their life, taking their life, 70% of middle-aged guys. Why is that? Because you feel like your life doesn't matter. You feel like your life doesn't amount to anything. And these are successful men, by the way. You've even mentioned that in some of the statistics. These are guys who have it all by the world standards, and they wake up one day and they go, you know what? Man, I didn't invest in my family. I didn't invest in my marriage. I didn't invest in the things that go way beyond just the material things. And so there's a sense, again, it comes back to that regret. And I think there's also the last couple years with COVID and what that did to disrupt a lot of lives. Like, I know people who were forced to shut things down. They were forced to have to slow down, and they took inventory and they went, my gosh, my life was so busy and I was running around, busy, hectic, flying all over the place, and I was chasing things. And then all of a sudden this COVID thing forced me to slow down, and now I'm taking a different perspective. And I'm kind of going, man, do I want to just busy my life again? I mean, is it worth it? So I think there's a lot of introspect that's happening now. And then I think also there's just this increase of a very prosperous nation. And there's a good side of that. God does love to bless and make us prosperous. But if we worship prosperity, that's a different thing. If we make prosperity the chief goal of our life, what I aim after, what I push myself to, you wake up one day having it all, realizing you actually have nothing. And I think we're seeing on the other side of a very wealthy country, a lot of measures of success and the metrics that we typically use for that. I think a lot of guys are waking up going, that didn't do it, man. That didn't make my life more meaningful. So what do I do now? So I think that's all of those things are stirring up inside of us. That, am I living my best life now? Am I living my life with purpose? Am I leveraging my life?
So how does one then step into this leveraging business? I mean, because that's, and for me, people will tell me at times, and I guess because I was an NBA broadcaster and somewhat regionally known, I know a lot of people. And so that invitation, when I'm talking to somebody and they know who I am, and that doesn't happen all the time now as much as it used to, because I haven't done it for 4 years. But I think I'm pretty good at leveraging relationships.
Yeah.
And I don't mean for my own gain. I mean, I try to always have my antenna up in a situation where, and it can be a business thing where somebody says, I do this. And I say, well, I know a guy who, would you introduce me? And that happens a lot. And there's nothing to be gained in that for me financially.
Right.
But it makes me feel really good.
Yeah.
To connect people and to leverage, maybe leverage, I don't know. I don't want to say status, my platform.
Yeah.
Because you have a platform too.
Yeah.
Leverage your platform, and it takes the focus off of our own silliness, because we all have that when you do that. And I find that part of leveraging is really healthy.
Yeah.
And it's soothing for me, because I feel great when I see somebody who has It can be anything. It can be an issue. I mean, I've got a friend who's a chiropractor, and I see somebody, and and then they come back and say, he's the best. I go there all the time. I love that.
Yeah.
But in terms of how you leverage the relationships to make them better, I find that's really healthy for me.
Yeah.
And I get a lot out of that.
Absolutely. It goes back to this like very intrinsic thing. We were created, God created us with a purpose in mind. And when you discover that purpose and you live it out, your life is just more fulfilling. It's that sense of, man, there's meaning, there's purpose, there's value, all of those things. And so one of the favorite things I love to do is help guys figure out who God created them to be. Now use that for something beyond just yourself. And when you do that, it's so rewarding and it's eternal, right? I mean, think about this. I can go out and make all the money in the world. When I die, I can't take it with me. But I can impact people, and that can last for eternity. And so I want to spend my life today on what matters. And so helping guys figure out, there's a verse in the Bible that I'm going to relate this to you because you love to create things. You're very creative. You are a craftsman. You know, you have in your man cave, in your garage, I mean, you got your workbench, you've got the tools laid out. I know you love to build things.
It's therapeutic.
It is therapeutic. And I think like that's a good example because God wired us all in that unique way, even though a lot of guys are like, well, that's not me. And I mean, think of the things that you've built. I mean, I have on the receiving end gifts that you have made, which is awesome because you've put your time, your heart, and energy into that. You've used your skill sets working with your hands. You've crafted the intentionality, the time, and there's a product. There's a something that comes from that. That's like, wow, that is amazing. And
then comes the pressure, which I hate. I have to tell everybody when I make stuff, and I'm making it for them, but I get a lot out of it too. But then it's like, Barrett's here. We better hang this up really fast because he's pulling in with his wife. And I always tell people, you don't have to. If this ends up in the garage sale next week, I really don't care. It was more about here.
Yeah.
And then I don't expect you to hang out on the wall. So anyway.
Well, it's cool.
I do have to preface that. So
well, I know you say that.
I know that you put stuff up when I
do. Like, in fact, that rustic wood American flag up there, which I think is awesome. You made that. It's the coolest thing ever. And even in my office at the church is you took these license plates and some of them have very significant value. You went out of your way to find even specific license plates, but the way you crafted it in the shape of the Sims fish, because, you know, that's something that we both enjoy. And I'm like, man, that's a piece of art. That's pretty sick. But you craftsmaned it, you workmaned it, you used your skill sets. And there's a verse in the Bible that says we, like humanity, men, we are God's craftsmanship.
I love that.
And God's this master artist, and it's like God's in the garage of heaven, and he's thinking of Mike Barrett, he's thinking of Mike Tatlock, he's thinking of every guy that's listening right now. And the verse that says, we are God's craftsmanship, and it says we were created to do good works, which he prepared in advance for us to do. So this is the trippy part. Before every guy that's listening right now, before you were even born, before the earth even existed, God had you in mind. And he's going to shape you in such a way, craft you in such a way, so uniquely that when you use that uniqueness, you step into your destiny that he created for you. And then when you do that, it's like this intersection, and there's meaning and purpose and value. Our lives come alive, and that's what we want to help every guy be able to do. Discover who they are. And by the way, God doesn't just use the good things. You know, I think of like a mosaic. Everybody can think of a mosaic.
Yeah.
A mosaic is a beautiful piece of art, and it's in a gallery or it's in a cathedral, and everybody looks at Michelangelo, these great artists, and you see these mosaics, but they're made of broken, sharp pieces. And that's
that are otherwise worthless.
Exactly. And I think every guy's life, God doesn't just use our polished areas I think a lot of guys will focus sometimes too much on their strengths. And we need to do that, but also know that God will use those weaknesses. How many friends do we have that have rap sheets? Dudes have been spending time in prison. I know guys have committed murder. I know guys that have done all kinds of the worst things, and God's like, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that as part of me shaping and crafting you, and let me leverage that in your life to make a difference. And all of a sudden, it takes that thing that was shameful and now actually becomes a prize. You're like, wow, God's going to use that in my life. Yeah, he uses everything. He doesn't waste anything about us.
So there's a question buried in there. If we want to get practical, and I've kind of relayed this before to people, and I have people ask me, okay, I agree. That's very good. How do people discover what those skills are, what those spiritual gifts are, what they need to leverage for the people going, I work 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I don't have a workbench. I don't have any major hobbies because I don't have time. I got 4 kids and they're all around the same age and I'm taking them to practice every night. I don't even have 5 minutes for myself. How do you discover, how does a guy today discover what those spiritual gifts are and what God wants him to leverage?
Yeah. Well, I would say everybody has something to leverage. Everybody does, whether you think you do or not, and especially the things you think God would never use. He might especially want to use that, right? And so I always use the acronym of what's in your hands, and I've used this before, HANDS. That just helps people remember things. H stands for what's on your heart. What's your passion? What are you excited about? What do you feel a burden for? Is there something that you're like, man, I need to make a change in that? Start asking that question. What makes your heart come alive? Do you like to coach? Do you like to mentor? Do you like to help people by showing up and building a deck for them, or helping them move, or a single mom that needs her oil change? I mean, if you have a heart for something, what do you bleed for? Start with that. That's the letter H. A stands for your assets. We all have them. What time do you have? Even if it's a little bit of time. Do you have physical gifts and abilities? Are you good with accounting? Are you good with numbers? Are you good with, building things? Are you good just relationally networking? Those are assets that you have. I also think of the letter N stands for your network. How can you leverage we're all influencers. We all know one or two or even more than that people. What can we do to leverage our influence, relationships? D stands for difficulties. Those challenges you're going through, the things you've learned, all those mistakes you've made. Man, think about how many times you can come alongside somebody else that is in the middle of making those mistakes, and you can help them get through it. You can help them learn from it because of what you had to learn through that. And then I think letter S just stands for your story. Tell your story. Everybody's got a story. And when you tell your story, it gives encouragement to other people. So we all have something in our hands, and start with what your heart beats for, jump into that, and you'll discover it along the way.
And maybe ask others to tell you their story.
Yeah.
Because how often do you really, and I don't do a good job of this. I'd like to think I do.
Yeah.
But I love, and it was kind of, I always thought it was a greeting, but my first partner on TV was Steve Snapper Jones, who was doing NBC games with Bob Costas and Bill Walton back in the day. And everybody remembers Snapper and Walton going at it on the national broadcast. But Steve always said, when you would walk in, what's your story? That's what he'd always say. And I think for him, it was more of just a greeting, but I always loved that. And I didn't really think about that. And Steve has since passed. And I was going to tell him one time, that's such a cool greeting. And it was more of a, what's up?
Yeah.
But I always looked at it as, man, you could take that. And oftentimes we ask somebody how they're doing, but do we really want to know? Because sometimes people will answer.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, now I'm stuck in a 10-minute conversation with stuff I really didn't want to know.
Right.
But I think about that stuff in terms of, and this goes to not only leveraging, but building community too. But something else I want you to talk about, and I know it's going to take a second, but I love the comparison. I know we're throwing out kind of like parables, but I like with this whole idea and this theme of leveraging, and it was something that I could easily wrap my head around, which I'm not that smart. So for me to be able to wrap my head around says something. But you talked about being a thermostat rather than a thermometer.
Yeah.
Which is kind of sounds, Tony Robbins-ish, but
Right.
I love
Probably where I got it.
No, I know, but I love the way that you explained it. So take a second and tell me what your meaning was behind that and how you did explain that, because I loved that.
Well, yeah, we're all familiar with both the instruments of a thermostat and a thermometer. What does a thermometer do? Everybody knows when you check the thermometer, you grab your iPhone even has the temperature on their way. What's the weather out? What's the temperature out? A thermometer, all it does is it tells you, it reflects back what the temperature of the room is. And that's all it does. That's its only job. It just tells you it reflects back the temperature. But what a thermostat does, a thermostat changes the temperature. And so am I the type of person that we live in a world right now where there's a value system, and the value system of the world says it's all about you. You go make money, you go leverage everything for yourself is basically what that is, right? So is my life, am I just a reflection of that temperature? It's a very cold world if everybody just lives for themselves. Or am I a thermostat? Do I leverage what I have to change the temperature in somebody else's life? Or someone is just struggling and I can give them hope. And I think that's where we become dangerous to what the enemy, we talk about spiritual warfare. Satan, the enemy, devil, he wants people hopeless. He wants people out there feeling alone and neglected and discouraged. When I leverage my life, not only does it make me come alive, but I get to change somebody else's life. And when we do, I'll give you an example real quick on this. You love your Traeger. You're amazing with your Traeger. Like I texted you the other day. I'm like, I'm doing ribs. Tell me what to do. You know?
Nick's better than I am. But
That is true. Nick, we're going to do a podcast.
yeah, we're going to do
with
some
Nick.
grilling. We got to do that.
We got to do a whole
This
grill
man
one.
stuff.
But what I love is like when we talk about Traegers and smoking meat, and I texted you about that because one of the things that's been huge that you've leveraged even that. Like think about this. So my wife has a chronic illness, and there's been a lot of days when she can't even get out of bed. And that's hard, man. It's hard. That's a hard thing for me as a husband, as a dad, and trying to stay hopeful, trying to stay upbeat for 20-some years.
You want to fix that.
Yeah, I want to fix that. And there's a lot, you can't. You feel powerless, right? And I can't tell you the times when you'll text me and you'll say, hey, I was just smoking some stuff on the Traeger. Can I bring some over for you guys? And I know sometimes it was leftover, but I know a lot of times you made it just for us. And you leveraged your Traeger, which shout out to Traeger again, right? We always want to do that. The Grill
Brought to
Center.
you by.
Exactly. But you leveraged that ability. Come by and you bring some food. And it made my wife come alive. One, she felt, wow, somebody sees what I'm going through. There's hope in that. There's encouragement in that. Two, we're all just downing it, and so that there's actually meeting a real need. But man, you leverage that. And I think like we all have something to leverage. And when we do, man, we change somebody else's life. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think. Like you can use anything. Just take that inventory, but start living for somebody else. And man, it makes a huge difference.
Well, and I think the last thing too, as we're wrapping up, I think that this is a harder one, but I think episode 2, we had Jeff Walsh on, who served time in federal prison. He's now leveraging his difficulties.
Yeah, that's right.
He's leveraging things he went through. And then I started thinking, I've tried to do that a little bit. I mean, I was a NBA broadcaster, fired after the 16 season, and then I knew immediately I could leverage that experience by not doing what people expected me to do, and that was not to get pissed and not to whine about it. Yeah. And then we had, Jordan Kent, who came 2 after me. He was fired too, by the way. Jordan was speaking the other night, and he was leveraging that difficulty for him.
Exactly.
So even though that's more difficult, that does weave into how we leverage for others, how we leverage and to honor the Lord through what we leverage.
That's it.
Is vital.
Absolutely. And I would say leverage for your home, leverage for your wife and your kids. Change the temperature of your home. You can change the temperature of the places you work, and you can change the temperature of your city. You can change the temperature of your community. When we start leveraging what we have, we can make a big difference.
Well, we thank you for listening. We encourage you to subscribe to our podcast. We're available on Spotify, iTunes, on YouTube. You can get the video broadcast. You can download the Vertical Pursuit app. He wrote a book about Vertical Pursuit, which is really a great way of, and it isn't just for men, but I think that's maybe your target audience, and it's all about discipleship, cohorts, and bringing guys alongside you, and there's some pretty practical ways to do that, because that is vital, that's rewarding, and that is how you leverage. So anyway, we hope to see you again soon. We appreciate the time you spend with us. Continue to spread the word, and we'll see you next time on Vertical Pursuit. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.